Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child in Life podcast. Military families are not like your traditional family. They are strong, brave, resilient, and some of the most incredible people I know. My name is Gracie, a U.S. Army brat, and I am your host. I am honored to be able to give military family members like myself a place for them to share their stories and experiences in the military life. Stay tuned for this week's guest. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child in Life. Today, I'm with Alyssa, who is also a fellow podcast host and Army veteran and Air Force spouse. So, Alyssa, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing good. Just got the kids dropped off and now I've got 3 hours to myself.
Yes, cannot pass that up. So first off, thank you for your service in the Army.
Thank you.
But tell me what it's like being a military spouse and, the transition from, being a service member yourself as well.
Well, I think being a veteran and then transitioning into the role of a military spouse, I feel like that kind of helped me to understand it a little bit more because my husband and I were both military together for a little while. And so I kind of understood what a TDY is. What is he going to experience when he's TDY? What is he going to experience when he's deployed? And kind of, I guess, the lingo and just understanding the process. So I feel like it was actually kind of nice that I was military before. I felt like I could understand it a little bit more once I became a military spouse. It definitely got harder as we added in children because I had never, we were both military and didn't have kids yet. And so being a military spouse and then navigating the deployments with kids makes it definitely a little bit more difficult than our first 2 deployments when we were it's just us.
Sure. Yeah. Once you start, even though you understand the lifestyle, once you start adding kids onto it, it becomes a whole different aspect that you're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's definitely different and adds different dynamics to it as well. And, and then moving, I had moved as a military veteran. I went to Germany by myself when I was single. I deployed to Afghanistan. And then when I came back stateside, him and I were married. And then I got out of the military and then we were there for a long time. He was at his first duty station for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And so then by the time we did his first PCS, it was like, okay, now we have 2 kids. I'm a military spouse and we're moving to Hawaii. And it was like, okay, this is so different than moving to Germany by myself. I could just bring my 1 suitcase and go. And now I have to figure out, okay, how do I get their school stuff going, change all the doctors, pack our stuff and move. It's different when you're moving as a whole family.
Yeah, especially because you were there for so long. When you're moving every 2 years, every 3 years, you kind of, the first couple are tricky. And then, as you add more kids on, between moves, it's more tricky as well. But being in one spot for so long and, I'm sure Hawaii is gorgeous and fun and tons of memories, but it's hard to move literally across an ocean into an Okonos location, because that's what it's considered.
Right. Yeah. It's considered overseas. When I would explain that to non-military people, I'm like, we're moving overseas. I'm like, I know it's not really
but it is.
You consider overseas, but I was like, we have to ship a car. We have to ship all of our household goods. It's not like we can load up in a U-Haul and do a Diddy move and move ourselves. And like I said, when I went to Germany, it was so different. I mean, I felt like it was not stressful at all. I was like, oh, here's my suitcase and somebody will hand me a barracks room when I arrive. And it's just easy versus with kids. You're like, okay, everybody's got to get enrolled in school. We need to switch everybody's pediatricians, their dentists, any specialist doctors. And so it was a big move. It was a lot. It was very eye-opening because like I said, we've been fortunate. We didn't have to move every 2 to 3 years. Like when I was Army. And so we would move every 2 to 3 years versus the Air Force, which is what my spouse is in. His job and where he was, they don't move as often. And so it's like you don't experience that. And so we've kind of been fortunate. We were able to get settled in to Oklahoma and had our whole network. And now we have to start all over.
Right.
It's very eye-opening.
Yeah. And not only do you have the kids' stuff to worry about, you have your stuff to worry about, and then your husband's stuff to worry about, and getting everything figured out and moving. And, military makes it a little easier on, the service member aspect of,
I think so.
You don't have much to do.
Right.
But then, as a mom, you're then left with the rest of the to-do list of, okay, all the kids stuff, which I'm sure comes first, and then, everything else, and getting a house, and, while, like I said earlier, Hawaii must be fun and, a great duty station to be at, it's still hard.
It's still hard.
Like any other move.
Right. Well, and it's so different versus, if I was moving from Oklahoma to Kansas or South Carolina, we could be shopping online for houses, or some of them would allow you to apply to the housing list versus Hawaii. Depending on which housing communities we applied to, you couldn't get on the wait list until you arrive.
Oh, wow.
And so that changes everything. It's like, okay, we're going to get there and stay in a hotel. And many people told us, you're going to be in a hotel for months. And so then there's that whole other anxious moment of, okay, so now I'm going to be living in a hotel room with 2 kids and all of our stuff for months. Did you say months? And so then I was diving into all of the spouse pages and looking for tips and tricks, and how do I travel with children and live in a hotel room with kids? And so we ended up traveling with totes. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody move overseas with the totes.
Yes.
But we had, I think it was 6 black totes, like 40-gallon totes, 3 suitcases, a pack and play, and then their car seats.
Oh my goodness.
And then loaded up and went. And so in each tote, I made a checklist of what was going to be in each one, like a kitchen tote, and toy tote, beach tote, because of course, Hawaii, we have to be ready to hit the beach and hit the pool immediately. That way we could get out of that hotel room.
Right.
So I had like a small pop-up tent and floaties. And I was trying to be as prepared as possible because I knew it was going to be a big transition for my kiddos too. And I wanted them to feel calm and be able to settle in once we arrived, for sure.
Right. And I'm sure, as soon as their eyes get locked in on the beach, that is the first thing that they want to do. Yes. Nothing else needs to come first.
Yes. My daughter was loving it. And the pool, it's like we had been so close to a pool, and now we can be in the pool every day. I mean, even now it's just, about to be December, and we can go to the beach. The pool says like, okay, we got to have everything ready because that's where we're going to be, the pool and the beach.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's one thing that a lot of civilian families don't recognize about how powerful these moves can be, of literally having to fly with totes. Yes. And, checking that ridiculous luggage. It does. And
it's big.
It's something that nobody would think of. And then you see these pictures of military families moving with totes and, have the big carts pushing literally their entire house through the airport. And it's like, you almost look at those like a horror story, thinking, oh, that's never going to happen to me. That's never going to happen. Like, I've never seen it before. So it rarely happens. And then you talk to military families and it's like, no, especially when overseas moves come with a big family, you're like, this is the regular. This is how we have to move because we don't have another option, really. And what are we going to do? Throw it all in a crate on a boat and hope it gets there?
It's going to take 2 months to get to you and your car.
Yeah.
It's like those little things that you don't really think about until you're actually navigating it. My church community was like, you're one of one of my friends there was like, you're one of the first military people I've ever known. And she's like, I had no idea what went into, because we had just finished a deployment. My husband was gone for 6 months, and it was my children's first deployment. And it was a long 6 months. And then he was about to come home, and he's like, oh, and by the way, I just found out we're moving to Hawaii. And so it's like, oh my goodness. Okay. So we just survived 6 months. Now we have, I think it was like 4 to 6 months to prepare. And now we're moving to Hawaii. So it's like a lot of change can happen in a year as a military family, not only enduring your spouse being away from you and navigating that with your kids. And then also the moves, because usually people are moving, summer, winter, and then trying to navigate that. It's like a constant changes and changes. And you just kind of have to move with it because you never know when it's going to happen. We went 14 years without moving. And then all of a sudden we had a deployment and a move all in 1 year. And it was just a lot.
Right. It sounds bad, but the military doesn't necessarily think about the family.
No.
It's there's one mission that needs to be accomplished.
Right.
And, the rest of the family is just along for the ride. And,
right.
Being a veteran yourself, I'm sure you kind of understood that point coming into it. But, right. that's the one thing is like the military just has that goal in mind. And then the family, we just kind of ride along with it.
You're just along for the ride.
There's no other choice. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because unfortunately, if you think about it, there's so many military members and then the members and all of their children, it would be difficult for the military to drop everything for each individual that comes along with the member. And so it's so hard to navigate that. And, we tried to move our moving date based on our child's school because we ended up moving in April. And I was like, well, I don't want her to have to move to Hawaii, live in a hotel and start a new school all at once. I felt like that would be very stressful for her. And fortunately, we had a wonderful school in Oklahoma and they let us do distance learning. That's a pro to COVID is that they have that capability now.
Right.
And so they let us do distance learning so she could do packets and stuff with me in the hotel and still get credit for finishing kindergarten in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so I was really thankful for that. So that was one less thing we personally didn't have to deal with, thank goodness, was arriving. And I saw people taking their kids to school. Some people didn't have that option to do the distance learning from the hotel. So they would arrive to Hawaii. Their kids are at the end of the school year. And now you're having to start a new school. You're living in a hotel. You're trying to find a house. And it's just a lot of change and trying to get comfortable. Trying to be in your own routine while living in a hotel room is hard enough.
Right. I remember our last move was when my dad retired. And so we took, of course, the remainder of the leave at the end of his before he retired. And we made sure that we moved right after I was in 6th grade and my sister was in 5th grade. So we moved right after that cutoff day. Right. Yeah. Tough years to begin with. And then our cutoff was May 23rd. And then there were 2 or 3 weeks left of school at that point. And so that was me and one of my other friends moved literally at the same day because that was the day where the school would say, okay, y'all have learned enough. Y'all have been here enough days. You can miss the rest of this. Yes. And you'll still get credit for that, awesome. Year. And so I think we were very fortunate that we were able to do that.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Rather than, having to move, in the middle of the school year.
Start a new school for 1 month. It's like, oh my gosh, everybody already has their friend groups.
Yes.
Schedules. And now we're going to launch you in there.
Exactly. And, every state is so different with how they run school. And so, in Texas, we would be going until the first week of June. Right. And then in Florida, where we are now and, where we finished our education, it was the last week of May. So we would have literally moved here, had a week, and then moved. Yeah, exactly. So it would have been chaos to be able to have to do that. And, that's no matter what grade it is, even kindergarten, that is really hard to do.
Yeah. I just feel like, for her, I know kindergarten sounds like, but they're just so young at that point, and it already feels like a big pressure to be in these new schools and moving around. I was like, oh my goodness, I just don't want to launch you into a new thing after I've already ripped you out of everything else that you've been in. And like I said, just eye-opening because we were so fortunate we haven't moved a whole lot. And when we got here, we met a lot of families that have been moving every 2 to 3 years. And seeing how they navigate it and how organized they are. I'm like, y'all are rock stars. And I had never really met anybody in the Navy because I only knew really Army and Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew my mind that some of the Navy spouses were arriving here without their spouse because their spouse would almost go on like a trip, I guess like underway is what they call theirs. They would already be underway while the spouse and the children and the pets and everything were moving here, or they left immediately once arriving to Hawaii, I guess because of course we're near water, so they probably go out more.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, so you're in this hotel with your kids and you're trying to find new housing, pick up your car, get your kids settled, and check in for all the military stuff, and your spouse is already gone. I'm like, I don't know how y'all do it. You're rock stars. You're amazing.
Right. Yeah. And, every branch is so different. Like you mentioned the differences between Army and Air Force, with moving. Right. And with every single branch, a lot of people, I think there's a big misconception that it's like, okay, you have the military and then you have the branches of it. And, Marines are pretty much the front lines, and then Air Force is in the sky, Navy is in, you have all of, you have each one that does their specific job, in a sense. And you would think it's all the same, but
yeah, you would.
No, it's so different.
They're all very different.
Yeah, there are so many differences just between, even Air Force and Space Force. Like Space Force was a branch of the Air Force, to begin with. Right. And then it got broken off, and it's still so different now between the two of what goes on, what, obviously what the mission is, but then, moves and PCSs and
how often you're going to go, how long your deployments are. I know like for Army, ours are a year. And, I did one of those. And when we were trying to decide, which one of us should stay in the military, it was like, okay, well, let's look at pros and cons of the two branches. And I felt like Army, I was like, well, I'll be deployed for a year. We're going to move every 2 to 3 years, and so before we had kids, we're like, okay, we need to figure this out because dual military is not working. It was hard to get stationed together for us. It works for some people, but for us, it was definitely hard. And so it's like, let's go with Air Force. The bases tend to be a little bit nicer is what I've heard. I mean, we've only been to 2 of them, so I'm not.
The ones I have been to, they have been significantly nicer.
I've heard they're usually a little bit nicer. It's like the deployments tend to be a little shorter, and so we ended up just going that route. But I definitely sometimes miss being in the Army because I definitely enjoyed it. I had a cool job. It was fun. But I'm glad that we have the Air Force side of it too, where we're shorter trips when he's gone, which is nice.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, there are people who do make dual military work and are very successful with it. And, tons of admiration to those families that do that, because especially when you bring kids into it, it is hard and it's hard to make work, especially, typically they tend to be the same MOS or something very similar. So then it is a much easier to get stations together. Right. But, when you bring in different branches and stuff like that, you don't have that. And deployments can happen at the same time. And, so many things stack up on each other. And I've had friends who have gone and stayed with grandparents because, both of their parents were deployed at the same time. And it just doesn't happen.
That would be hard.
Yeah.
I was definitely worried that we would accidentally get orders to different places.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if anybody would fight for us or not, because when we didn't have kids and we were married, it was already quite a fight between the two branches to get somebody to talk to somebody else. I was supposed to go, I was leaving Germany and I had a ticket to go to the East Coast, and he was still in Oklahoma and there was no sight of him ever moving. I was like, okay, so now we're going to be apart again. We'd already been apart for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, now we're going to be, states apart. And then what happens when we have kids? Could that ever happen? Would we potentially be stationed in different states, or, oh my goodness, Oconus and Conus? That would be insane. So we were just too nervous to roll the dice. I was like, we're just going to play it safe. One of us gets out and one of us stays in. And that, I feel like that's our safest bet.
Yeah, for sure. Because like you said, you never know. You truly never know until those orders are cut, and finalized, and you're there, because orders can change at the drop of a dime.
They change quickly.
You never know. You could have orders to go overseas, and then, you get there even, and they say, oh, nope, sorry, you're going back. You know?
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, let me just flip my whole life upside down. You just got to be able to roll with it. And so it's a big thing.
Yeah, exactly. And, like I said, admiration to those families who do make it work, but it's such a challenge, because you never know. And, it's like you said, with school, it makes it hard with that. And then so many other things that, it's already a challenge with one family, and then one family member in the military. And then you start bringing more into that. It's just chaos from there.
Right. And then you try and add in your pets too. Like, I've seen people moving that have their pets, and I'm like, more props to you guys, because that's a lot of work. Like, coming to Hawaii, they're really strict with your pets for their vaccinations. And so I've seen people, and they're talking about, oh, we couldn't fly because of the temperature, so their dog couldn't fly. And now they have to wait for somebody else to ship their pet to them. And I'm like, oh my goodness, the whole overseas part too is just, depending on where you're going, can be so different. And there's just a lot of ins and outs. And so definitely joining like all the spouse groups, I feel like, is really important. I feel like that helped me the most when I was moving. And so I'm glad that I kind of knew to connect with any spouse group I could find on Facebook for asking all the questions: which housing communities to live in, which hotels to live in, all of that kind of stuff, I feel like is so helpful. So it's also nice that there's like this network of all the military spouses work together, share information, and help each other too. So it's a nice.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think about those like spouse groups on Facebook and stuff, and automatically just link it to, base drama or what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, that's there too,
chaos, for sure. And it's there. But if you filter through, yes, anywhere. But filtering through that, there's so many good resources and valuable information, especially when you're moving to a specific location that you've never been to before.
Right.
Because I think Hawaii is on like everyone's bucket list of,
I'm sure,
to go and visit. But, if you haven't gone and visited, you don't know what you're getting into when you're moving there. And the only way to know is connecting with people that do live there or have lived there, and know what's going on, and know what you can expect and how to navigate everything going into it. And that applies to any duty station, even, moving within the states of, one base in, I don't know, like Oklahoma to Florida or something, where it's still a substantial move, but it's a little easier.
Right. Well, because you still don't know, okay, if I'm looking at a house online that I might want to rent or buy when I get to Florida, is that in a nice neighborhood? How would I, it's like, how do you know from so far away? So I feel like that was like some of the top questions I would see for people moving into Oklahoma. It's like, okay, if I lived in, Edmond, how long would it take me to get to the base? And so even like simple questions like that, is the commute doable if I live in this city or this city? Do these ones have good schools? Or is this a safe area to live? So even those like simple questions are nice to be able to ask on those pages. And that way, when you're moving, you kind of have like an idea, because it's hard to just move to a new city and buy a home and you're just kind of guessing because you've never lived there before. And so then Hawaii or any other overseas locations, like a whole nother step up, because you're like, okay, now I have to look at all the different housing communities. Same thing with like the commute, like how far is it? All that kind of stuff, that just lots of questions. And so it's a nice place to kind of filter through and see what people have asked in the past, and then updated information too, and just re-asking the questions, because things change.
Right. Exactly. And you never know. One of the biggest things with like commuting is you never know the traffic that's going to come
and
up.
It is big here.
Oh, I'm sure. It's such a small, little place that, it's everyone's trying to get somewhere. And so pretty much at the same time.
That's why I was like, we're going to live right near our base. We're not going to live. We slightly thought about living in a different one because people are like, oh, this is the beautiful side. We're like, oh, okay. We went out there and I'm like, no, we don't need to commute. And it blew my mind. Some people are like, oh, they canoe to work. I'm like, they canoe to work. So I guess
I've
some of
never
the
heard of
areas have
that.
like, right. Some of them have like a water area where you can go and get to the base. I'm like, well, that's interesting. But I think we're going to live as close as we can get, and not have to battle traffic, because I don't want to sit in that every single day.
Yeah. And then I'm sure if canoeing is a big thing to get to work,
I feel like that's a lot of work.
Some traffic there, some sort of backup in a canal or something along the way.
Like, that's not my cup of tea. If you want to ride your bike to work, okay, if we live close enough, but I don't know about canoeing.
Yeah, that's a little interesing. I'm sure there's got to be like some sort of gate or something they've got to go
I don't know.
No,
when in Hawaii,
so
right?
Yeah, and it's so crazy because you don't hear about those things, Again, I'm sure somebody mentioned it on the spouse pages, but you don't hear or think about those things until somebody says it to you, and it's like, okay, are you being for real? Yeah.
Right. Are you being serious, or are you trolling me right now?
No, and it's the things that are unique to each location. Are so incredible. And, just the different cultures within the United States, and even though Hawaii is considered a, Okonos location, but it's the United States. And so it's just so different. And, Alaska is the same way, still so different. But then the continental United States, like, you never know what you're getting into when you go to a different place.
Right. But it's such a cool opportunity. Like, that's something that I love about being in the military. And now that I'm not active duty, but being a spouse, like, I still get to experience it.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. I always tell people, I've seen ones that are like, should I take this Oconus trip, or should I just stay stateside? I'm nervous to do the Oconus thing with kids. I'm like, it's difficult, but they're never going to get these experiences again. I mean, how cool is it for your kid to get to grow up in Spain or Germany, Hawaii? I was like, it's difficult being far away from your family. That's a struggle for me. When we found out we were coming here, I was pretty devastated. I was excited to see Hawaii, but I was not excited to go on another trip where I was so far from my family. My kids aren't going to get to see my parents as often. But I was also telling myself, this is such an opportunity for our kids to experience hikes and the beach, and they can do Hawaii over several years versus having to pay all this money to go on one big vacation, and you're trying to get each thing in. You can only see so much on that 1 week vacation.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is our chance to get to show them Hawaii and a different lifestyle than what we were living in Oklahoma. We're able to get outside so much more here and get more active and moving, and, just make the best of it, really, and go out and experience it while the military is the one sending you. Like, this is your chance. Go out and explore.
And it's fun because you can, especially going to places like that. And I think people do it for any duty station. But you see it a lot more for those fun and adventurous ones, like Hawaii or Germany. And they just build a bucket list of so many things that they want to do when they get there. And I think that is so important because it helps, if you're scared of going, or if you're nervous, and especially kids who are in school and have friends and don't want to move. Yeah. So it's like an encouragement of, okay, no, this sucks. Like, we are going to go through such a big change in our lives, but we're going to make it fun, and we're going to go and do all of these things, and, go to the beaches, travel and explore the different islands, go hiking, and so many incredible things within just one state.
Right. Yep. That's definitely what I told my oldest, because she had mixed emotions. She would be super excited about the move, and then she would go towards but I'm going to miss everybody. And I kept reminding her, that's okay. I'm going to miss everybody too. I'm going to miss our church and our community and the home that we've built here. But I am also very excited about our next opportunity. I'm excited to meet new people, and I'm excited about this or this in Hawaii. And I would show her pictures and videos and try and show her the positives, but also remind her that it's also okay to miss what we're about to leave. It's okay to be sad about leaving where we currently are, because that's totally normal. I mean, I'm going to miss all my friends as well. And it's like, we got to take that piece in and not try and shove it down.
Yeah.
Accept that, but also look forward to what are we going to get to experience now, and look at those positives as well and take them all together. And I feel like that helped her, because I would show her pictures of the hotel, what it was going to look like. We're going to have a pool, and then I let her help pack our boxes, like our totes. Pick your favorite toys that you want to put into this tote. This is the toy tote for you and your sister. And I want y'all to pick what you really want to be able to see, because some other things we might not see for a while.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that also helped her to prepare the baby. She was only a little over a year old when we moved. So for her, she was just along for the ride.
Yeah.
She didn't care either way. But for my oldest, it helped to let her pack the boxes and look at the pictures and take it all in to help her prepare mentally for such a big change.
Yeah. And I think that's one fun thing, that when kids do get to that age where they begin to understand what's going on, is they can help and they can, start to make those memories for themselves of, okay, yeah, I'm going to be sad and it's going to be hard for, a period of time. And then, we're going to do fun things, these are the toys I'm going to get to see again for sure, like relatively soon. But these ones, it might be a while, and, I'm going to miss my friends, but I can make new friends, and, we can go to the beach together, or we can do so many different things that, just starting to look forward to what you have coming, and, so remembering what you have back in Oklahoma, or, wherever your last studio station is.
Yeah. And pen pals. We also did the pen pal thing, and her class actually sent us letters that her whole class had written her. It was so sweet. It's like we had the best school. I loved the school that we had in Oklahoma, and they sent letters to her that her little friends had written. And then the teacher had sent like a book for her in a whole little package. They're like, once you get settled and have an address, just send it to us. We want to send these things to her. I was like, you guys are the best.
Yeah, that is so sweet, especially because the school year was still going.
Yes.
And she didn't feel like she was missing out on something, because, her classmates still remembered her and included her in the class.
Yep. It made her feel very special. And then we got postcards as soon as we arrived, and she filled out about how she saw her first mongoose. As we were walking around the hotel, there was just a mongoose running by. And then tire swings and all the beautiful flowers. And so she wanted to write all the things to her friends to tell them what she had seen so far since arriving to Hawaii, and the rainbows, because the rainbows in Hawaii are amazing.
That's so sweet, and such something that, you think of pen pals, you think of writing letters, and it's like a lost art form now.
Absolutely.
Nobody really does that anymore. But that was something I found so fun as a kid, being able to, write letters to my dad while he was deployed, or, we kept journals. And so when he'd go on trainings, we'd have a journal where we'd just write letters to him. And at the end of the year, or at the end of the month that he was gone, I think we even did it when he deployed too, but we would pull them out and we would say, hey, this is what we wanted to tell you while you were gone. So
sweet. I like that idea.
Things like that, they're still fun. And it's, letters do take much longer to send than a text or an email or a FaceTime or something, but it's so fun and so memorable.
I was going to say memorable, because you can keep the letters. Like we have, like even before we had kids, my husband has the postcards that I would send him. Anywhere I would go in Germany or Europe, I would send him a postcard from everywhere I went. And I would write a little bit about what I saw and send it to him. And he kept them all. And so now it's kind of fun. We can show our kids these postcards from when mommy was in Afghanistan, or mommy was seeing different places in the world, and what was I doing and seeing. And so same thing, we send the postcards from here to our family. And it's just, she loves getting to put a little stamp on it even, and just go put it in the mailbox. That part's exciting, and then we can keep some of those ones that we've sent and received, and, look back on them someday. Because in the moment, it seems like we'll never forget these moments. But now I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, Germany feels like such an like so long ago. And so it'll be fun when they're older to get to look back on those little pieces of memories too.
Yeah, I love going through, my mom has a scrapbook of my first trip to, my dad was on a stateside deployment to Fort Leonard Wood. And so,
nice.
She put together a little, yes, she put together this little scrapbook, and it had, I was an infant, so my first plane ticket, and
oh my goodness, yeah,
everyone was, pictures of everyone in the barracks that he was staying in his unit, and everyone was just so excited to meet me. Because she had gone down there and visited. We were living in Ohio, so she would go down and visit when she was pregnant with me, and then everyone would be like, we just want to meet the child now.
Right.
And so going down there and visiting, and to seeing everyone, for that first time. But it's so fun to look back to that scrapbook, to those memories of that trip that, my mom, documented. And then looking back to the journals that I wrote in when my dad was gone, or the letter that he wrote to me while he was deployed. So, things like that are really fun to look back on. And I'm such a keepsake person, so I love to keep all those memories.
My husband's like, you're like a hoarder of these pictures. I'm like, I know, but I love them so much because, like I said, you think you're going to remember it because you're in the moment, but then you look back and you're like, wow, look at us here. It's just, I do Shutterfly is what I started doing.
I love that.
And so I go on there and make their scrapbooks that they have. And so I've started it when my first daughter was born. And so the start of the scrapbook is always in September, and then it ends on her birthday. And so I have one for each year, and I, put a few pictures and then write a little bit in there, and then even like quotes from the kids, because they say the funniest things. And you're like, I love that you say it that way. And I never want to forget that, the way that you talk to your sister about her craziness. I'm going to put that in the scrapbook.
Yeah.
And then we can look back on it. And I always put pictures from, some of the deployment stuff too. Like, here was us during our COVID time. Here was us during a deployment. And here's pictures of Daddy at the Green Bean getting a coffee for his me day, Now we can look back on those. And I know someday when they're older, we're going to love getting to see that stuff. And it's hard to keep up with. I feel like it's getting harder now that there's 2 kids, but I'm still trying to occasionally go pop a few pictures on there, type in some words, and just try and keep those memories. And then the books are small, so they're easy to keep up with.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah.
And then, it'll be fun for them to show their kids. Like, here are the adventures I went on literally as an infant that I don't even remember. Right. But, this is stuff that I did. And, I can say I've been to Hawaii. I can say I've lived in Hawaii. I may never do it again. But, this is some times that I had there and some things I did there. And I love those memories.
Yeah. So fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the last thing I want to ask about is what advice you would give to another military spouse?
Ooh, well, I would say each of the phases will pass. Just remember, even when you're in the deployment and you're in the thick of it, that time will end eventually. It's hard, but just continue to, like, I pray. So I continue to pray through those moments where it gets very difficult, and then building a community. It's difficult being a military spouse because you're so far from your family most of the time. So what I've worked hard, and I'm not necessarily an outgoing person all the time, but I've worked really hard to try and meet other military spouses and build my new community so that when my family is far away, I still have people that are there to support me when I'm having a hard day, help watching the kids sometimes so I can, have just a moment to myself if my spouse is gone or deployed. So I would just say each of the phases will end eventually. God never gives you something that you can't handle. And then building a community, because those other spouses also know what you're going through. And most of them are more than willing to help support each other through those hard times. Hang in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it almost slipped my mind, but tell listeners about your podcast as well.
Okay. Well, so I recently started a podcast called Homefront Chronicles Podcast. And, I just feel like at this point, I can't return to my regular job. And so I wanted another way to share my experiences in motherhood, my military journey with other moms, and try and be supportive and share positive resources. And so I decided to start this podcast where I'm going to have on other moms and sharing pieces of our journey and just show that we're all in this together and you're not the only one going through some of the struggles. Sometimes it can feel that way when you watch other people's highlight reels, but hang in there. I hope to be a positive resource if anybody's ever looking for some mom tips or just to see that you're not the only one going through it. Hang in there.
Yes, absolutely. And where can listeners listen to your podcast at?
So you can find me on Spotify or Apple Podcast, Homefront Chronicles Podcast. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Homefront Chronicles Podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, follow, and comment. Also, be sure to check out Instagram and Facebook at Grace of a Military Child and Life for more awesome content. For information on the podcast, Military Child Bigs and Littles, GoAMCL blog, or other resources, visit www.goamcl.org. You can also email me at Gracie, that's GRACIE @GOAMCL.org with any questions or comments. To be a guest on the podcast, you can schedule it at www.goamcl.org/schedule a podcast, all one word, or contact me via social media or email. Stay tuned for the next episode where another incredible story is shared.